We will speak on Pashas Yisro, as we usually do on the Pasha, and we will also we'll also talk about Tu B'Shvat, which is a special day today. But first, to keep true to our schedule, the Pashas Yisro, as you know, is the Pasha of Matan Torah. And it's a very interesting phenomenon that the Pasha of Matan Torah has the name of Yisro. And who was Yisro?
Convert.
Yisro was a convert. It could have been a Pasha named by Moshe, Moshe's name. That would be more suitable. It's called by Yisro. Not only that, it's called by the name of Yisro, but when the Torah mentions Yisro in this Pasha, it tells us many things about him that we already know from before. And moreover, these are non-complementary things, it would seem. You know what complementary means?
Good things.
They are, to me,
Good things.
they're right. They're not such nice things. It says, Yisro Kohen Midyon. Kohen Midyon has two meanings. To explain that, it means two things. Kohen Midyon means he was an elder in Midyon, he was a ruler, a guide. And also Kohen Midyon means that he was a great authority on the Avodah Zarah of Midyon. He was a Kohen. He served in the Avodah Zarah, and as it says that Yisro in fact was an authority on Avodah Zarah. Rashi brings down, as you surely learned, that there was not a single Avodah Zarah that Yisro did not study, and Yisro did not practice to get down to its core. And this the Torah mentions not just to describe who Yisro is, because we know who he is. And this Kohen Midyon is also mentioned before. But it seems that it's an important point to make that here Yisro is coming, who is the Kohen Midyon, and this facilitates, this is the hachana, this is the preparation for Matan Torah. In simple terms, this is telling us, and I should mention that the Zohar says that Yisro's coming was necessary for Matan Torah. This made it possible that it should come Matan Torah. There were 600,000 Yidden, and amongst them were the greatest and the smallest, and they were all Yidden who had followed Moshe into the desert. All went through the bondage in Mitzrayim. They came through Kriyas Yamsuf. They were all well prepared for Matan Torah, and yet that would not facilitate Matan Torah. Yisro's coming, this was a necessity. And the explanation for that, in simple terms, is that the principal purpose of the Torah coming down and the principal preparation for Matan Torah is that we are prepared and we are ready to receive the Torah not just at the Torah level, but at the lowest level of the world. Because the function and the purpose of Torah is not just the level of Torah, but to permeate and to transform, to change the world itself. That is the purpose of Torah. We mentioned in the past, I'm sure you learned also in other occasions, that Avraham Avinu, from time of Avraham and even before, but certainly from time of Avraham, Yitzchak and Yankov and the Shvatim, there was Torah being learned. Not only was learned, but they always kept the mitzvahs. They kept the Torah before it was even given. So what was the great step, significance of the giving of the Torah? So to this the Medrash says that by the time of the giving of the Torah, there was a great change, a fundamental change in the entire creation. Hashem created the world. You heard the term Seder Hishtalshelus. Hishtalshelus means that the godly light is going downwards. And as it's coming downwards, each step down becomes an entity unto itself and becomes separated, so to speak, unaware and not connected to the one that's above it. And ultimately, really it is even more than Seder Ishtalshelus. It was a creation of Yesh Me'ayin. And the principle of Yesh Me'ayin is that the Yesh, that the lower Madrega, has no concept and no connection whatsoever with the higher. This is how the world was created. That there was a categorical split, separation between the lower and the higher. This was necessary in order to establish the lower world as a true entity unto itself.
True entity?
Entity, a presence, an existence that is independent, that is a thing for itself. And this went to the point where people have created, it was so deeply removed and separated from godliness that people were able to develop ideas of Avodah Zarah. And the greatest scholars of the world were able to say, I don't know of God. I don't know of God. I only know the rules of nature. Pare said, Le yadaites Hashem, I don't know Hashem. And we have to understand that we're not talking about people who are just capricious and stupid. They were the greatest scholars of the time. And the Rambam explains, if you learn the Rambam, Yichus Avodah Zarah, the Rambam explains, how did Avodah Zarah come to be? How did it originate? Avodah Zarah, whoever invented Avodah Zarah? So Rambam explains that this was not created by some fools. These were people of intellect and scholarship. And they studied the world, studied the entire process and the structure of the world. And they came to recognize that our earth does not operate independently of all the planets and all the various stars and powers around it. The sun has a tremendous influence on our earth. The moon has a tremendous influence on our earth. All the various planets have tremendous influence on our earth. The stars have an influence on our earth. And they were able to recognize it and study it. And they recognized and understood the influence that it has. That without them there would be a completely different world, a different earth completely. Having understood that, they came to the conclusion that these are servants of God, that God had assigned to them the task of overseeing the world. And from this came the next step, where they started saying, oh, these are servants of God. They have to be respected. They have to be honored. Clearly, the idea itself that they have to be respected and honored came from an impure source. No matter how it developed, sort of rationalized, it's a very impure source. And what is essentially the source of it? The source of it is simply that the tendency that people want to know, want to have a grasp, wants to have something tangible. Avraham Avinu, Avraham Avinu, was also born into a household of Avodah Zarah. And he was actually raised with Avodah Zarah. Not raised, he grew up. Not for a very long time, but at first. Certainly his whole household was full of Avodah Zarah, and his entire environment was full of Avodah Zarah. And Avraham Avinu himself was very curious, and he was a student, so to speak. He tried to understand what is going on. He heard what his father had to say, he heard what his teachers had to say, and he started questioning, and he said to himself, and this is the one thing that Avraham differed from all the people around him. As far as they are concerned, these are powerful emissaries, powerful appointments from God. And we have to recognize them, and we have to honor them. And Avraham said, but these are not real things. These are all temporary. The sun comes and goes, the moon comes and goes, everything rotates. There has to be something that is real on a constant basis. That doesn't change. That has to be the real source. And after going through a painful and torturous process in his mind, he came to the conclusion that God is something that really we don't see. It's not tangible. And Avraham was able to relate to it and says, that's the God that I want to serve. This is one of the greatest challenges. How can you serve an intangible? People always want to have something that they can have control over, that they can fully understand. And this is how Avodah Zarah developed. And they started saying that we have to honor these stars, and then afterwards they came to the point where they said they have to actually worship them because they are God, they appoint us, and this ultimately developed into all kinds of perversions, all kinds of sickness, perversion of Avodah Zarah. This was permitted, was allowed to happen. This was facilitated, was made possible to happen because of this separation, because that Hashem created this world in such a way that in the world itself you do not see any spirituality. You do not see it. It is completely, as we know, completely rooted in godliness, but you don't see it. Complete separation. And thus, even our always Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yankov, and the Shvatim who did mitzvahs, who understood with their minds that no, God, we have to serve God only, and they understood the manner that we serve God. What is the way to live that is according to godly principles? Nevertheless, they were not mitzvahs. They were not really changing the world. They just changed themselves. They acted and lived according to godly principles. They could not bridge the gap. They could not break through the coarseness of the world. That they couldn't do. The Torah was given for the purpose and at the time when it became possible to break through the coarseness of the world.
Coarseness is gashmus.
Right. And and that itself was given specifically to the Jewish people. The whole world was not yet ready. This takes time. But the Jewish people, they had gone through Mitzrayim. They had gone through all that they experienced in Mitzrayim, where by the time of coming out of Mitzrayim, they recognized that they exist as a nation only by virtue of the fact that Hashem took them out of Mitzrayim. In other words, there was a godly hand in that. It's not something natural. The Jewish people were created in a totally different way. We discussed it on one time before, than every other nation. Every nation, Mitzrayim. How did Mitzrayim become a nation? Chom, Noach's son, had a son, Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim went and he settled on the Nile, in that area. And they lived there, and his children and grandchildren, and they developed into a larger group, and it became a nation, Mitzrayim. It developed naturally. There was no godly interference, godly definition. This is a land, this is a land, I want you to be this. It all developed naturally. Except for the Jewish people. The Jewish people became a nation in exile. But they didn't have a land. They didn't have a land, they were created in the desert. They had a constitution, so to speak. They had a Torah. They had a way of life. They had a real belief. They had principles of life without a land. Every other nation, first they lived together, and the laws developed from their experiences. The way they interact with each other, that's how the laws develop. The Jewish nation was created in totally reverse order. Their principle of existence, what defines them as a nation, is their relationship to God and their Torah. And then they first went into a land. So this entire situation, this entire phenomenon, made it possible to bring a Torah to this world. And what is the Torah? The Torah is God's view, how God sees the world. Not how people see the world, but how God sees the world. And to bring that view, God's view of the world, into this world, this is a revolution. This is a complete change, a transformation, a complete redefinition of what world is. And within this redefinition, within this change, there were many levels. As we said, first of all, there was a nation born in bondage, born in Mitzrayim. And this nation came out of Mitzrayim miraculously. And then this nation went through Kriyas Yamsuf. And Kriyas Yamsuf represented a situation where the Yam became dry land. The sea became dry land. That itself is very significant in our world. You may have learned about this. It's explained in Siddur that there are basically there are two levels in world. There is what's called Alma di Iskasio and what's called Alma di Isgalio. The concealed and the hidden world and the revealed world. We will speak on a very simple level. The earth, the dry land, is called Alma di Isgalio, the revealed world. Why is it revealed? Because everything that exists on the earth, every entity, is identifiable by itself. Not only is it identified by itself, but it really, in a certain sense, lives and exists independently of the environment. Environment, the area. I'll explain to you what I mean. For instance, right now, it's cold outside. The temperature outside is in the 30s or 20s. Our temperature, the body temperature, doesn't change. We live independently of that. Our temperature cannot change to 30. We couldn't live. We couldn't live at 96. Forget about 30. It has to be 98.8, whatever it is. And if it's anything less than that or anything above that, God forbid, a person is sick. No matter what the temperature, the outside temperature is, we're completely independent of it. This means this gali. Everything is independent and separate. The bruin shebiyam, the water animals, the fish that live in the water, they're hidden and they're contained within the water, within their habitat. And they are truly contained within because the fish do not have an independent temperature. The fish have the temperature of the waters that they swim in. They are part of the water. They don't live independently. They are part of their habitat.
You hold a fish when you go to the mikvah, it's not a tzitzi.
That's right.
Hello?
So when we had the Yamsuf, okay, this we see. I want to get it more closer to us. Okay, this is what we see in Alma. This is why the sea is called Alma di Iskasio. This Alma di Iskasio is a whole world. It says that it's known. In other words, there exists Alma di Iskasio, the hidden world, Atzilus, Alma di Iskasio, and then there's Alma di Isgalio. To speak about Alma di Iskasio at the level that we can relate in our experience, in our life, in our world. In every person, there is the iskasio, there is the concealed and the hidden part of the person, and then there is the revealed part of the person. The revealed part of the person we're all very familiar with. This is our seichel, what we learn, what we know, what we experience, what we feel. But we all have to recognize that this which we learn and this which we know and clearly understand, there is a whole world above that we don't know. Every time we learn something new and we understand it, we have, during this process, connected and related to a deeper part of ourselves, where this Indian could be understood. Give you a vivid experience. I'm sure everybody has experienced a moment where you struggle to understand something, and after the struggle it says, work hard. You struggle, you can't get to it. And you concentrate and you work very hard, and then you say, I get it. What is this? I get it. I get it means that a certain spark, a certain connection that we get coming from a deeper source that made it possible for us to understand it. We spoke the other day that the human being is a whole world unto himself. Every person is called Olam Kotten, a small world. The reason he's called a small world, the animals are not called a small world. The human being is called a small world. The reason he's called a small world is that the human being, in fact, contains everything that exists in the world. The human being can relate to it, has an aspect of it. This is why, pardon me, this is why there is nothing in the world that a human being cannot study, cannot get to understand. Because he has everything that's in the world. He catches he finds a new breed, a new animal, it's never seen, and he says, what kind of animal is this? How does this work? How does this operate? What's his nature? After a while, he can understand this animal. Because the human being has everything. But he has everything in his soul, in his neshama, in the Alma de Iskasya. In the revealed world, in his consciously aware world, he has a very limited amount. Whatever he already experienced, whatever he already came in touch with.
So like if you say that the person is able to understand everything because he has the source in his neshama, why you say that it instant to say that every human being is able to understand, we should say that every Yehudi is able to understand.
Every
Yehudi.
Jew.
Why? Because the Gentil has no neshama.
Excuse me?
It's a question, right?
Yeah.
Why we say that?
Why do you say human being, not Jew?
Not Jew.
Okay. The truth is that the human being, in terms of understanding this world, the human being can understand the world. Every human being can understand. A Jew is able to understand the higher world also, which they are not capable. But to understand this world, they are also capable. So in every person, there is the essence, the hidden part of the person. And every time that a person understands something, he is actually reverting back to his nefesh and getting that understanding. This is what's called in Tanya, that you've learned about, it's just called Chochmah. Chochmah, there is Chochmah and Bina. Bina is that which we consciously understand, which we figure out, we put words and sentences and forms, that we learn. Chochmah you can't learn. Chochmah is a gift from God that we have. But we can reveal more and more of that Chochmah. This is called revealing from the hidden state to a revealed state. The splitting of the Yamsuf, this represents, on the general scale, it represents the opening up the hidden world, that the hidden world should become open, should become a revealed world. So that as a result of this, we are capable of revealing in our conscious thinking, we are able to connect to our Chochmah, and we're able to connect even to that which is higher than Chochmah, to the higher levels of the nefesh, of the neshama. So, the principal accomplishment and purpose of Matan Torah is to bring godliness into the world to the point where we should be able to actually affect and transform and change the world. And this changing of the world, there are different levels. What is the lowest level in the world? The lowest level is Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah, this is the point of the world where you completely dissociate, break away from God completely, the opposite. And this is why it was necessary for Matan Torah that Yisro should be there. Yisro, who was the greatest authority on Avodah Zarah. And he came and he said, I now recognize, as you learned, that Hashem is the real thing. He is the greatest. This is the real God.
I don't understand this last piece. What is how does Avodah Zarah come in? I understood until the point where you said about that the creation of the seed, there's different levels.
The union of Torah is to change the world. And to change the world means to reach the lowest level of the world. If you don't reach the lowest level, you haven't changed anything. It's only temporary. What is the lowest level in the world? Avodah Zarah. And that's why it was necessary that Yisro, who was the authority on Avodah Zarah, he should come before Matan Torah and recognize the truth of God, and that makes it possible the Torah should come down. To conclude this part of our talk, I want to say that just as Yisro in his days, he represented that part of the world that was the greatest accomplishment in terms of affecting by Torah. Throughout all the ages, throughout our history, and we have a very long history, 3,500 years. I don't know to what extent we realize what kind of history this is. And we carry the Torah throughout all of these ages. And throughout all of these periods, which were vastly different one from the other. The entire history of the world is represented in the Jewish people. They were there throughout. They saw it all. And their Torah was tested and permeated through all of it.
Jewish nations, the older or not?
The Jewish nation is not the oldest, because the Jewish nation starts from Abraham. Okay? Mitzrayim started before the Jewish nation.
But now we don't have Mitzrayim.
That's right. Now we don't have Mitzrayim. Oh, what exists now, yeah, that's the only nation that exists.
Yeah, Jews,
The only, no other nations can associate to its historical origin. It's all mixed up. The only nation, in terms of, yeah, sure, that's the only nation. At every juncture, at every period of history, the Torah and the Jewish nation were thrown right in the midst of the challenges of that period. And it was their task and their job and their accomplishment to show how that particular view of the truth is false, and how that particular view of the truth can be transformed by Torah. This goes back throughout all the periods. Just to give you one very important classic illustration. There was what one may call a glorious period in the world history, in the world of intelligence, of philosophy, the time of the Greeks, of Plato and Socrates and Aristotle, that were great philosophers. And there is a letter from Aristotle. This is brought down in Seder HaDeiros, that at some point in time, Aristotle, who wrote very deep philosophical works, such that even the Rambam quotes, he met up. It's not clear whom he met with. It was Yirmiyah or Bar Ben Neriah. It's not clear in terms of what period it was, but he met up with the Jewish Torah, with the Jewish scholarship. And then he wrote, after I have been exposed to this, I realized that the truth is by the Jews.
Wow.
Aristotle.
This is documented today, you can find it?
Yeah, and it's brought down in the Seder HaDeiros.
But by the Goyim they have this?
But the Goyim, they don't have anything. They don't have Aristotle.
In fact, the Goy accept the truth of the Shufrikon, but say that it's finished with Yochanan.
I mean, the way I learned on time, maybe
Yeah.
it's not true, but isn't it that Aristotle is one of the basic philosophers of the Christianism?
Of the what?
Of the Christianism.
Christianity.
No.
That's how I learned all the time. I don't know. I never dealt with it, so I didn't look for it. That's how I heard.
He was much before.
Not much before, but he's...
No. It was much before. He was maybe 1,000 years before.
They adapted it, I mean.
No.
Aristotle was Greek philosophy. No?
Oh, Greek.
Philosophy.
Yeah, no, but I heard.
Greek, no. Not at all. No, nothing to do with it.
In the city of Alexandria, which all the scholars were and all the inventions and they had a huge library, the Library of Alexandria. The largest population in that city were Jews.
I think at the time, much later, the time of the Rambam. The Jewish people were thrown around from one corner of the world to the other, and everything was tested against them, and their function and their ultimate accomplishment was to permeate and break through the darkness of the time, and to show where the light is. And the same thing is replaying itself in our own days. Our own days, we have the sciences, and there was a time where science and scientists were worshipped, and this is the epitome of the truth. Now we have reached the end of times. And slowly but surely, science repudiates itself, and they come to recognize refutes, and they come to recognize on a slow basis. Now, at one time they mocked the Jewish view of creation. Now they don't mock it anymore. Now they're saying, "Oh, it's possible. We're not sure." With Hashem's help,
take credit for it. With Hashem's help, we'll get credit for it.
With Hashem's help, this will be completely broken through and revealed. The point which I want to make as far as us is concerned is each one of us, we have had our different exposures and different difficulties that we have in terms of coming to Torah and to understand Torah and to relate to the principles of Torah. We have to understand this is not in vain. This is not an accident. This is, in fact, the principal power of the Torah, that the Torah can stand up to anything that the world can present, no matter what the situation is. And just as Matan Torah originally, Matan Torah couldn't happen until the opposite of Torah, until the Avodah Zarah would come and admit to Torah. The same thing, the true breakthrough and the Gilei Elokus, the Medina from Geula and Moshiach, is also dependent on breaking through and permeating every aspect of the world, everything that can present itself as an opposition to Torah. As long as there is anything in the world that can say that no, we have an argument, we can present and show that the Torah is not the ultimate truth and the truth lies someplace else, this is where we have to go and show its fallacy and break through it. I want to tell you, recalling back the early years of the Rebbe, going back in the late 50s, early 60s, when the Rebbe first started the campaign of going out and teaching Torah to the outside, in the colleges and universities, in general to the outside public. It was difficult then to imagine that you can come to a university. People who study, so to speak, sciences in such a worldly and a logical fashion, And you can come to them and tell them what the Torah says, and make him see the truth of the Torah. Because he was thought that Torah cannot be presented in such a clear and rational, logical manner that would be acceptable to a scientific mind. Torah, you need a emunah. You can learn Torah if you have a emunah. But to learn Torah in so to speak, from outside would be impossible. And what the Rebbe had shown and what has been gone through all of these years, that absolutely broke through everything. And now every shliach has classes in which the biggest scholars, the professors and the lawyers and the philosophers attend the classes, and they are thrilled. They're thrilled with it. Excited. They're excited. They can't have enough. You know what the most popular title for a class today is? If a shliach wants to make a class and get the most attendees. What's the most popular title?
Men, women, and Kabbalah.
What is happiness?
Men, women, and Kabbalah.
Kabbalah.
Men and women, you get even more.
Well, Kabbalah. If you say you're going to teach Kabbalah, you're guaranteed an attendance.
Kabbalah.
Kabbalah.
Kabbalah. Madonna learns Kabbalah.
Again, I want to repeat so that we don't lose the point. I want you to understand. We have to face up, bring the Torah to challenge our own difficulties. We must not hide from them. Just as we have to affect others, we have to affect ourselves. And any impurity that a person has, anything that he has a difficulty with, he has to bring it up. And he has to bring the light of Torah to bear on it, and guaranteed he will find a way out of it and find how the Torah illuminates it and purifies it. None of us, this is something which, I speak to guys and so forth, none of us should accept having some kind of a dark corner in our hearts and saying, this I'll never understand, and then go out in the world with this bit of sourness that you don't know what it's going to do. When you have a good piece of dough, but there is a little bit of sour milk in there, the whole dough is going to spoil. We don't need anything to spoil us. If anything, this is the time. You have to know, Torah, see this is what it is for. This is why it was given here. So by the time we're ready to face the world, we come out pure and healthy and wholesome. We feel solid on our feet. We're not shaking, we're not doubting ourselves or doubting the world or doubting the Torah. I also want to speak about Tu B'Shvat. And since Tu B'Shvat is also Yom Tov, we want to celebrate it, so maybe we'll say L'chaim before that, and then we'll talk on Tu B'Shvat. How's that?
Yeah.
Right. I make a question. Why is it? I never understood this. Why is it that Torah couldn't be given at the beginning, not the first day of Christmas, like at the beginning of the story? Since stated like the mamish purpose of creation, what is worth anything else without Torah? Why did the world need it to be 2,588 years without Torah?
54 seconds.
What?
154 seconds. Sure it wasn't in the Bible.
It's because Adam and Eve, they kicked the Shekhinah back the Shekhinah got kicked back 7 levels. So, they only kicked it back once, but eventually got kicked back 7 levels. They wanted to bring it back for Moses to capture Torah.
Yeah, but this is not explanation. This is all kind of circumstantial. But what is the real meaning behind it? It's not just an accidental thing. There's an interesting minhag, and it's a minhag, but it's almost like it's very, very commonly done, especially by Lubavitch. We are very careful with that. A child, a boy, who needs a lot of training, we don't begin to train him till he's 3 years old. Before 3 years old, we don't even cut his hair. We're going to cut his hair. We don't do anything. It has to do with mitzvahs. Some people put a yarmulke on his long curls. Some people don't. But that's about it. At the age of 3, we cut his hair, and we leave payas, and we put a talaskotin on him, we put a yarmulke, and then he begin to train him. Right. And that is, at least one view, one way to understand it is that we want the child not just to do mitzvahs, but we want him to know that he's doing mitzvahs. If he is born with a yarmulke on his head, and with payas and with talaskotin, he wouldn't know the difference. It's not a question of his recognizing that he's doing a mitzvah. But there is something to it. There is something that he has to consent, he has to understand, he has to relate to. That's based. The similar thing is in the world at large. The Torah could have been given to Adam Arish. But then it would not have that power, because there wouldn't be no one. What is it correct? What does it do? You've learned surely in Chassidus the meaning of the pasuk in Tanya, Yisro ha'oir mitoy ha'choshech. Right? Yisro ha'oir mitoy ha'choshech means that the real quality of oir, the essence of light, you don't recognize unless it comes with the ha'choshech. And this is what the world had to go through, the choshech, in order to recognize and to accept the real oil of Torah.
The Torah which Abraham, I think that was the Torah which Abraham learned in the yeshiva of the grandson of Noah. From where come?
From their seichel, from their wisdom. Avraham Avinu wrote a sefer, wrote a book,
Sefer Yitzhak.
Sefer Yitzira. Odom Orishin had a book.
Book of Raziel. Book of Raziel.
That's right, Raziel.
Raziel.
Yeah, we have.
So you know all the buzzwords.
Yes.
Okay, now let's get into the real stuff.
Guy knows the whole shot. Don't let him fool you. He knows a lot more than you. He knows the whole shot.
I know what?
The whole shot.
What's a shot?
Anyway, guys, let's say L'chaim, and we'll talk on Tu B'Shvat. L'chaim. Should have a good haskalah from Tu B'Shvat, and all the inyonim that Tu B'Shvat stands for we'll discuss in a minute. L'chaim. Amen. Oh, you're doing well. Okay. Tu B'Shvat, is called Rosh Hashanah Le'ilonis. It's Rosh Hashanah for plants, for trees, and thus, and it says, Odom Eiz Hasoda. The Torah says, Odom is Hasoda. Odom in some way is compared to Eiz Hasoda. And there are many aspects that we can focus in and see how it means, how significant to the Odom. The Rabbi points out in the Sikha, just want to mention this, that just like the Eitz HaSoda has a function. Number one, it has to grow constantly. This is what its title. It's a tzomeach. It grows. It doesn't stay still. And also that it produces fruit for human consumption. So too, a human being has to know that he has to constantly grow, not stay in one place, not stay on one level all the time. Growth by a human being is a sign of life, and if he stops growing, then automatically he will be actually retracting, falling down. There's no way; it's one way or the other. And also, he has to know that his life and his qualities are not just for his own consumption or to be wasted, but it has to be prepared for others to benefit from. That's part of the inyan of an elon. An elon stands there and produces beautiful fruit for others to benefit, to use. I want to point out another aspect that is spoken in Chassidus of. I discuss it a lot of times because of its enormous revelation, enormous illumination that it gives us. The Alter Rebbe explains what is the phenomenon of a tree growing out of the ground. Where he says you put a kernel into the ground, the kernel disintegrates into the ground, and then the ground itself recognizes that kernel and says, oh, this is an apple kernel, which means it wants to grow apples, and the ground produces an apple tree. Just as we said before, that a human being encompasses the entire world, and the reason we can relate to everything in the world is because a human being really encompasses and has the totality of all existence. That's where he can relate to it. The earth Hashem said that's the earth should produce vegetation. Eitz pri eitz api, this is all produced from the earth. At that point, Hashem has put into the earth that quality that the earth is able to produce every kind of vegetation possible. And it all is part of the nature, part of the personality, so to speak, of the earth. Except, just as we said by a human being, to reveal various things, there has to be a means how you reveal it. Otherwise, it stays concealed in the nefesh. And in the earth, it's the same thing. That to reveal its capacity, its koyak to produce an apple tree, you have to solicit it. How do you solicit it? Call it out. Solicit it. Call it out. How do you call it out? By putting in a kernel into the earth. Not by just putting a kernel, but the kernel disintegrates, or breaks open. And it connects to the earth. And that's when there is the koyach hatzimeach. The koyach hatzimeach, the koyach in the earth, that for growth, for vegetation, recognizes that particular kernel, that particular nature, and produces the apple tree. In terms how this is reflected in the human being. In the human being, as mentioned before, there is amodis kasya. There's a concealed part of the human being. This concealed part of the human being, the chokhmah, Alter Rebbe explains that the chokhmah shebenefesh, this is that point in the nefesh odom, in the soul, in the human being, where we are intrinsically means completely and naturally united with the Creator. This is where we are one with the Creator.
Imuna.
From this comes Emunah. Emunah is the conscious, is the revealed part of it. But the concealed part of it is much richer than the Emunah. This is the real, this is where a Yid is one with his Creator. This is like the kernel disintegrating into the ground. When the kernel disintegrates into the ground, then all the beauty, all the richness and the resources that the earth has go through into this kernel. And it produces a tree of tremendous capacity. Which tree?
A peach tree.
A peach tree. Everybody can choose their tree. What's your favorite tree? You understand? And I want to point out a very interesting phenomenon, which again, over the years I may have pointed it out here. This point that the Alter Rebbe makes, that the tree grows from the koyach hatzimeach of the earth, not from the kernel, is extremely significant. Besides the point that we explained now, it's extremely significant from a different viewpoint. If the tree were to grow from the kernel, per se, that means that the tree has its limited source, which is the kernel. And it has, so to speak, only the power and the nature of what this kernel stands for. And therefore, its relationship to the earth would be like something that is a stranger, like an intruder. You know what an intruder means? Somebody who doesn't belong there, right? The earth is what the earth is. And you put a kernel in there, and the kernel is sapping and is stealing something from the earth in order for it to live. But that's not what happens, because the kernel disintegrates, becomes one part of the earth, and it is the earth itself that produces the tree. And every tree that grows from the earth, that we see a tree growing, we don't say, oh, this is not natural, this tree doesn't belong here. It's occupying a spot that doesn't belong to it. No, it belongs to it. And the earth is, so to speak, very happy to sustain and give life to this tree. It's not a stranger there. Why? Because it does not grow from the kernel. It grows from the earth itself. It's really part of the earth. It really belongs there. The similar thing, the similar point, we have to translate and understand how it applies to us. Every individual, every person, sometimes he feels comfortable where he is, sometimes he feels uncomfortable, sometimes he feels welcome, sometimes he feels unwelcome, sometimes he feels understood, not understood, a stranger, a home, a belonging there. This is all very superficial. You know what superficial means?
No.
Not superficial? Chitzonius. Chitzoni. This is only chitzonius. In essence, every person, especially a Yid, has to relate to the real source of his sustenance, to the real source of life. A Yid, we, like I said, we are, in the Chochmah, we are one thing with Hashem, before the Emun. And from that perspective, everyone belongs where he is. He doesn't need anybody's permission to be, because it's Hashem who gives him his place in the world. Just like a tree is not an intruder into the earth, it lives there because it belongs there. The earth is very happy to hold it. The world is very happy to have every individual, every person. Why? Because the world is the Koyach Hashem. And every person has every, not only right, it's beyond right. Every person is given the natural place and the godly sustenance, the godly spirit for him to be in the world. Because even though, as we say, it's an Amadis Galio, I have my body and I have my feet, my shoes and my place, and I have to have my house and my food. This is all on the external, on the superficial level. The essence of life is in the neshama, and the essence of life is in this chokhmah, where that is the real life. This where we are one with Hashem completely, and this is where we draw to our real life. And from that perspective, we are always at home. We're always in the place where we belong, and we always can draw from that and bring out more and more of its fruit, more and more of its understanding, of its seichel, and to apply it to our lives and to apply it to the world. We don't need anybody or anything to recognize and to accept us. This principle, which is a very profound principle, this is what carried us, the Jewish people, throughout the 3,500 years of history. Which you know that 2,000 of that, more than 2,000, much more than half of that period, we were in exile. We were not in our land. They were all over the place. And we were treated in all kinds of different ways. None of that mistreatment ever destroyed our spirit. You understand what that means? Never. Because our spirit, we didn't relate to what our neighbor thinks, what the guy thinks. Our spirit we got from our connection to Hashem. And that connection is very real. It's very real. We really recognize it in our soul, in our alma discussion. And no matter what the circumstance is, we always felt at home. Like I told the story, I think yesterday from Mendel Futterfass. I'll tell it again. He was a chosed of Mendel Futterfass. I mentioned this story many times. Mendel Futterfass, you heard about the Mendel Futterfass, right? He was imprisoned in the Russian Gulag for 10 years. He was a Yid, a chosed in the true sense of the word, a scholar, an oived. And they imprisoned him, and they put him to work, to hard labor. So he told of an episode during that period when they were in a labor camp, and in this labor camp were all kinds of intelligentsia of Russia. That's what they did. They took the finest and the greatest people of them and sent them away to labor camps. So he says that after a while, when things settled and people kind of began to accept their circumstance, accept their lot, so people after a day of labor, when they came back to the barracks, they would sit and they would start talking, and eventually they became a little bit more expressive and made a joke here and there, had a little laugh on their face. They were all broken people. But the normalized life began to normalize. So he says there was one evening they were sitting there and they were kind of joking around in a light way. They were all intelligent people. So and the spirit in the room was kind of a normal. But then they noticed on the corner there was one man sitting, and he didn't join in their revelry. And he did not. He was down and sour just as ever. So they turned to him and they said, "Comrade, come in, join us. Why are you so sour?" So he said, "How can I possibly join you?" He says, "when I think of what I was before I came here. Before I came here, I was the head doctor in a big hospital, and everybody, respected my word. I was the last word in the hospital. I tended to the most important, people in the hospital, and I ran the hospital, professionally, well, the way it should be. It was real life. It was real human life. And look at me now. Look at me now. Nothing limited. After he told his story, so somebody else pipes up and what do you think I was before I came here? I was a big lawyer. And everybody respected me and everybody wanted my services. Blah, blah, blah. And look at me now. So he became sour. After he finished, somebody else pipes up and what happened? I was a great engineer and I built the railroads and I built ships, whatever it is. So he became sad. After a while, the whole room turned back to discontent and to their normal mood. And a Mendel was sitting over there too, and he was sitting in his corner. He didn't join the revelry, and he didn't join the sourness. He was neither here nor there. So they turned to him and said, "No, what about you, comrade? What about you? Surely you're missing also the position in life that you occupied before coming here." So he said, "I'll tell you the truth. By me, nothing really changed. Nothing changed. Before I came here, I was a chassid. And I'm still a chassid. Nothing changed." You understand? A Yid, he lives with the Rebbeinu. The Rebbeinu is all over. Nobody can take it away from him. Nothing can take it away from him. Nothing can minimize it. This is his life. And he feels at home wherever he is. So L'chaim, Rebbe should help each one of us here. We should be in touch. We should be in touch with our real selves. And the more we are in touch with our real selves, the more we will understand the simple world around us. The simple world around us is not a separate thing. This is what the Torah did for us. The Torah gave us the ability and it taught us how we should connect the inner soul to the outer function. And this is a very important thing as far as what I know, what I've noticed, and what is necessary for all of you. We should, that I mentioned before, we have to feel healthy inside. We have to feel comfortable. We have to know who we are and feel confident. And you can know the shas. It will not give you what you really need. If you know the neshama, if you know your soul, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying it. This is the most important part. The most important thing is to know yourself and to be in touch with this, with the truth of the neshama. When you stand up to daven, you have to be very deep, but you have to feel comfortable. I belong here. This is the real thing. I'm not faking. I don't feel uncomfortable. I don't feel out of place. I don't feel out of my area, of my category of where I belong. I feel perfectly comfortable. That has to start from Moide Ani, and from davening, from Adonai, from learning, and from putting on tefillin. This is the most important thing. And this is absolutely possible because every Eid, every one of us, is directly connected to the Creator of the world. You have to understand it, you have to know it. This is the source of our life. This is the source of all our seichel and everything that we understand. So l'chaim, we should have real life, siddush life, and we should be besimcha and successful in all our endeavors.
Amen.
Das sind der Nigen. The Nigen that you are in the mood of singing. Come down the octave. nothing afraid of me.
Hello.
Okay, back to work, Hebra.